It began in silence. Late one night, inside the dim halls of the Warren Occult Museum, a security guard heard the faint scrape of glass. The sound came from the far corner where Annabelle sat, sealed behind her wooden case. The glass had fogged slightly, though the room was cold. A moment later, the red lettering on her warning sign, "Positively do not open," caught the light from his flashlight, and for the briefest second, he thought he saw her head turn. He froze. The air grew heavy, almost aware. He took one cautious step forward. A soft knock echoed from inside the case. The next morning, when curators checked the footage, the camera feed had cut out at 3:09 a.m., the exact time the motion sensor triggered near Annabelle's display. People dismiss it as urban legend, but those who have been near her case don't joke twice. For decades, this doll has been at the center of whispered fear linked to accidents, curses, and unexplained deaths. Yet, what's even more disturbing isn't the doll itself, but what's inside it. The story doesn't begin in a museum. It begins in a small apartment in Hartford, Connecticut, 1970. Two young women, Donna and Angie, shared a place close to the hospital where they worked as nurses. Their lives were normal, steady paychecks, friends, laughter echoing through the apartment. But then came Donna's birthday. Her mother, knowing she loved vintage things, found a used Raggedy Ann doll from a hobby store and gifted it to her. It was simple, yarn hair, button eyes, faded dress, innocent. Donna placed it on her bed like a childhood keepsake. Days later, the small things began. The doll's position changed. At first, she thought she'd moved it herself while tidying up. But one morning, Angie noticed it sitting cross-legged on the couch, a position neither of them had ever placed it in. Later that night, they found it standing, leaning against a chair. Still, they laughed it off. Maybe one of their friends was playing a prank. They didn't yet realize that the laughter in that room was the last they'd share in peace. Weeks passed. The movements grew bolder. Sometimes they'd leave for work and return to find the doll in another room entirely. Doors closed, everything else untouched. Donna began feeling watched, even when alone. Her boyfriend, Lou, stayed over one weekend and swore he saw the doll's arm twitch. Then came the parchment notes. Small scraps of paper, rough, old, and yellowing, began appearing on the floor. Each had faint pencil marks scrawled across them. "Help me, help Lou." But Donna and Angie didn't even own parchment paper. They worked in a hospital. They didn't keep antique stationery. When the notes continued, fear finally began to crawl under their skin. One night, Donna returned home to find the doll sitting upright in her bed, its hands resting on its lap, and what looked like small droplets of blood on the back of its cloth hand. She checked herself. The sheets, the floor, nothing. The stains hadn't come from anywhere she could explain. By now, sleep had become scarce. Every sound in the apartment felt amplified. Lou urged them to get rid of it, but Donna hesitated. What if it really was haunted by a spirit, like she'd heard in old ghost stories? So they called a local medium. The woman arrived with prayer beads and calm confidence. She sat cross-legged on the living room floor, facing the doll. The seance lasted almost an hour. When it ended, she looked up at the two nurses and spoke softly. "There is a spirit here, a little girl. Her name is Anabelle Higgins." According to the medium, Annabelle had died on the property years before, a young girl whose spirit felt comforted by the kindness of the nurses. She only wanted love. Donna's heart broke. Against Lou's advice, she decided to let Annabelle stay. The doll remained, placed gently on the couch, as if it were part of the family. But something about the story never quite fit. If this was the spirit of a child, why did the air feel colder at night? Why did shadows stretch longer when Annabelle was nearby? It wasn't long before Lou began having nightmares, vivid, suffocating ones. In them, he'd wake up paralyzed, only to see Annabelle crawling slowly up his chest, her soft hands pressing against his throat. He'd jolt awake, gasping, sweat pouring down his neck. He tried to convince Donna again to throw the doll away, but she refused. Then one afternoon, as he approached their apartment, he heard faint rustling from inside. The The place was empty. Angie was at work, Donna out shopping. He opened the bedroom door. Annabelle lay sprawled on the floor. As he stepped closer, something moved behind him, a rush of air, a sudden sharp pain. Lou stumbled back, clutching his chest. Blood seeped through his shirt, 3 deep claw marks, as though torn by something invisible. He survived, but the wounds burned for days. When Donna and Angie returned, they called for help, real help. And that's when Ed and Lorraine Warren entered the story. When Ed and Lorraine Warren arrived, the atmosphere in the apartment was already suffocating. Lorraine later said the moment she stepped through the door, she could feel it, that heavy, crawling presence that clings to walls and hides behind corners. They sat with the nurses as Donna recounted everything, the movements, the messages, the blood, the scratches. Lorraine's eyes kept flicking toward the doll sitting motionless in the corner, as if listening. Afterward, Ed took out his recorder and began documenting. His voice, calm but tight, echoed through the apartment. Whatever is attached to this object is not human. He explained that spirits of children, genuine souls, rarely, if ever, attach themselves to inanimate things. What they were facing was something else, something pretending to be innocent. Lorraine nodded silently, staring into Annabelle's button eyes. It's deceiving them, she whispered. It wants to be accepted so it can stay. And that's when everything changed. The Warrens began investigating the land history, searching for any record of a young girl named Anabelle Higgins. Nothing matched. No deaths, no graves, no missing child with that name. What they did find, though, were signs of ritual activity from decades earlier. Symbols carved into tree bark, small totems buried near the apartment complex before it was built. This wasn't a ghost story. It was something older, darker. When the Warrens confronted Donna, she broke down in tears. We just wanted to help, she said. Lorraine put a hand on her shoulder. You invited it in, she replied softly. You gave it permission. Ed prepared for a blessing, arranging relics, holy water, and a crucifix. He placed the doll on the table. The apartment fell silent. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then the room temperature dropped nearly 10 degrees. The air felt like ice. The lights flickered. Ed raised the crucifix, and the wall behind him shook violently. The doll hadn't moved, but the table beneath it had. After that night, they knew the apartment could no longer be lived in. The Warrens decided to take Annabelle with them to cleanse the doll properly and contain whatever was inside. But the moment they lifted her from the table, Lorraine felt a pulse, like an electric current, shooting through her arm. She gasped and nearly dropped it. It's resisting, she whispered. They wrapped Annabelle in a blanket and placed her in the backseat of their car. Ed started the engine, trying to brush off the unease. The drive home was supposed to take less than 2 hours. It became a nightmare. Halfway down a lonely stretch of road, the steering wheel locked. The brakes failed. The car veered, nearly hitting a guardrail. Ed slammed the wheel hard and managed to stop the car inches from the edge. Both were pale, hearts racing. Lorraine turned to the backseat. The doll sat there, perfectly still, but her head had turned to face them. Ed pulled a vial of holy water from his coat and sprinkled it over the doll. Only then did the car start again. For the rest of the drive, he recited prayers under his breath. When they finally arrived home, Lorraine said one thing. This thing, it's not finished with us yet. They placed Annabelle in Ed's study for the night. The house was quiet, peaceful, or so it seemed. Around 3 a.m., they heard heavy footsteps echoing from the hallway. Ed grabbed a flashlight. Nothing. When he returned to the study, the doll was sitting upright in a different chair. Its hands were positioned differently, one open, one clenched. The next morning, Ed called in a priest, Father Cook, to perform a full exorcism of the doll and the apartment. The priest was skeptical, but agreed. As he began reading the ritual, the doll seemed to vibrate slightly, as though something inside it resisted every word. When he finished, Father Cook lifted the cross from her lap. This object must never be touched again, he said firmly. Lock it away It's a conduit. Ed built a small wooden case lined with protective prayers and sealed Annabelle inside. Lorraine felt a chill pass through her as the latch clicked shut. For a brief moment, the house grew still again, calm, almost safe. But deep down, they both knew that evil never truly dies. It waits. Months later, Ed and Lorraine officially moved Anabelle into their occult museum, a private collection of cursed and possessed artifacts from their cases. The doll sat in her glass enclosure with a wooden frame, sealed and blessed by a priest. They hung a sign, positively, "Do not open." Visitors would often ask why. Ed's answer was always the same: because it's not a doll, it's a warning. But as time passed, curiosity got the better of people. One man laughed at the idea that an old Raggedy Ann doll could be dangerous. He tapped the glass and said, "If you're real, prove it." Ed told him sternly to stop, to apologize. The man smirked, posed for a picture, and left on his motorcycle. On the way home, he lost control of the bike. His girlfriend survived with minor injuries. He didn't. Lorraine later said, "That spirit doesn't forgive mockery." By now, stories about Annabelle had spread beyond Connecticut, whispered among paranormal circles, written in small newspaper blurbs. But the Warrens never saw her as a trophy. They saw her as a living reminder of something ancient, something that feeds on attention. Every few months, a priest would come to bless the case and reinforce its seal. Each time, he'd describe a strange heaviness in the air, and sometimes the doll would shift ever so slightly, just enough that the priest would hesitate mid-prayer. Lorraine once said she caught sight of movement reflected in the glass, even though the doll hadn't moved at all. "It's not the doll," she explained. "It's what's standing behind it." The Warrens' museum grew over time, filled with cursed relics collected from decades of investigations. Mirrors that whispered, idols that moved, and boxes that should never be opened. But among all of them, Annabelle remained the centerpiece. Visitors said her case felt colder than the rest of the room. Lorraine believed it was because the entity still lingered, dormant but aware. Each morning, before allowing anyone inside, Ed would walk through with a rosary, muttering prayers under his breath. He never looked directly at Annabelle for long. He once said, "That thing knows when you're watching." Over the years, strange occurrences continued. The museum's lights would flicker only near her display. Objects would fall without reason, and sometimes guests reported feeling as though something brushed past them when they stood too close. Lorraine began to notice patterns. People who mocked the doll, who laughed or challenged it, often experienced accidents or intense nightmares afterward. To her, Annabelle wasn't trapped. She was contained, but only just. There was one particular night that confirmed it. A young seminarian came to visit the Warrens, hoping to see the infamous doll for himself. He asked Ed for permission to open the case, to test his faith. Ed refused, but the seminarian ignored him. As he turned to leave, he banged on the glass and shouted, "You're just a doll. You can't hurt anyone." Ed pulled him aside, furious. "Never challenge it," he warned. "That's not a child's spirit. It's a demon pretending to be one." The seminarian apologized and left, visibly shaken. On his way home, his car lost control. He survived, but the vehicle was totaled. Later, he told the Warrens he'd seen a pair of glowing eyes in the rearview mirror moments before the crash. That night, Lorraine sat by Annabelle's case in silence. "It's feeding again," she said quietly. The Warrens began inviting priests to bless the museum regularly. One of them, Father Jason, arrived with quiet confidence. "It's just an object," he told Ed with a smile. "Evil only has the power we give it." As he leaned toward the glass to pray, the room temperature plunged. His breath misted. He froze mid-sentence and stepped back. "I think that's enough for today," he said softly. Later, when he returned home, he called the Warrens, voice trembling. "I felt something with me in the car," he said. "Something laughing." Ed wrote it down in his notes. Another entry in a long list of warnings people never took seriously. Over time, Lorraine began having dreams, Annabelle's face glowing faintly in darkness, whispering words she could never remember upon waking. To Lorraine, those dreams were reminders. The entity wasn't sleeping, it was watching. Years passed. The Warrens continued their investigations, but the legend of Annabelle only grew. Hollywood came calling. The stories inspired books, documentaries, and eventually films, each adding more layers to her mythology. But the real doll, the raggedy figure behind glass, was far more sinister than anything on screen. Ed worried that the fame would make people careless. Every time her name is spoken, he told Lorraine, it draws attention, and attention is exactly what it wants. When visitors entered the museum, they were told to keep their distance, to show respect. But curiosity is a powerful thing. Some couldn't resist. A teenage boy once knelt in front of the case, whispering prayers, while his girlfriend recorded on her phone. As they left, Lorraine noticed his reflection in the glass. For a moment, it didn't move when he did. She said nothing, just watched them drive away. Weeks later, she received a call. The boy had fallen asleep at the wheel and crashed. The girlfriend survived. He didn't. Coincidence or curse, no one could say, but the pattern never broke. By the late 1980s, the Warrens had stopped displaying Annabelle to the public without supervision. Too many strange incidents had occurred. Faint knocks from the case, muffled laughter during blessings, and temperature drops recorded on multiple occasions. Ed reinforced the case with new locks and a crucifix carved directly into the wood. He hired a trusted carpenter, a friend from the church, to help secure it. When the work was done, the man said he felt dizzy and left early. That night, he woke to see the doll standing at the foot of his bed, or thought he did. The vision vanished when he blinked. He quit the next day. Lorraine began keeping the museum closed for long stretches, fearing that even proximity could awaken something. She often said, "It's quieter when it's alone," but even locked away, Annabelle's story refused to die. The more people talked, the stronger the legend became. Years passed quietly. The museum remained still, like a tomb of forgotten relics, but the stories never stopped. Visitors whispered about cold spots, unexplainable camera malfunctions, and feelings of being watched. The Warrens had passed away, but their legacy and Annabelle's endured. In 2017, the museum's caretaker began noticing something odd. The cameras near Annabelle's case glitched more often than any other. Once, during a routine check, he froze. For 3 consecutive frames, the doll's head appeared slightly tilted, then back again. He replayed the footage over and over, but there was no sign of editing, no trick of the light. He showed it to his assistant. The assistant laughed nervously. "Probably vibration," he said, but the caretaker had been there long enough to know vibration doesn't make glass rattle when no one's around. That same night, thunder cracked outside. The power went out for exactly 13 seconds. When the lights flickered back on, the sign beneath Annabelle's case, "Positively do not open," had fallen to the floor. It was around that time the rumors began. 2020, the year when chaos seemed to touch everything. One morning, a Twitter post went viral. "Annabelle has escaped the Warren Museum." The tweet spread like wildfire. Screenshots, memes, even fake videos claiming to show her walking down roadsides flooded the internet. People laughed, joked, made hashtags, but others didn't. Paranormal communities went silent. Some believed it. The museum's new caretaker denied it immediately. "She's still here," he said in an interview. "She's never left that case." But the strange part, no one had posted that tweet from the museum's official account, and yet it contained photos that hadn't been released publicly before. Images showing the case slightly open, Annabelle tilted forward. By evening, the tweet was gone, deleted. the user's account vanished, too. The internet calmed down after a few days. The caretaker even filmed a video walking directly to the case, showing Annabelle behind the glass, unmoving. But people noticed something odd about the footage. The timestamps didn't match. Some claimed the video was pre-recorded. Others pointed out a subtle shadow behind the doll, a shape that didn't match anything in the room. The museum explained it away as lighting, but that didn't stop the speculation. And for weeks after that viral scare, paranormal investigators from around the world reported an increase in strange activity. Objects falling on camera, EVPs whispering, "Let me out," shadows captured near dolls that looked eerily similar. Even skeptics began to wonder if Annabelle really was still sealed away. Then why did her presence suddenly feel so widespread? One of the Warren family's close friends, Tony Spira, decided to perform a renewed blessing ritual just in case. He brought in a priest and several witnesses. Cameras were set up. The priest began reciting the ritual in Latin. As he reached the final verse, a loud knock echoed from within the case. A single, sharp thud. Everyone froze. Tony's wife gasped. She swore she saw the doll's head move slightly forward. Afterward, the air in the room turned heavy, almost suffocating. One witness, a cameraman, complained of dizziness and nausea. When they reviewed the footage later, the audio had distorted, as if someone had whispered directly into the microphone. No one could explain it. That night, Tony wrote in his notes, "It's still active, contained, but aware. It reacts when tested." And yet, the strangest reports weren't from the museum at all. In the weeks following the ritual, visitors began posting online about seeing the doll elsewhere. One claimed to have spotted a Raggedy Ann figure sitting inside a diner booth at 3 a.m. Another said they saw it through the window of a passing truck on the highway. Of course, photos surfaced, blurry, pixelated, easily dismissed. But still, the timing was eerie. People started saying that Annabelle didn't need to physically move anymore, that maybe, after decades of fascination, she existed everywhere her story was told, in screens, in words, in the fear itself, because evil doesn't always break glass to escape. Sometimes it just slips into the air carried by belief. When you listen closely to Annabelle's story, you start to realize something. Every retelling breathes new life into her. Every whisper, every YouTube video, every late-night conversation gives her a kind of power, the same kind that fear always feeds on. The Warrens believed that objects could be infested by spirits, not possessed in the Hollywood sense, but used as vessels by something darker, something that feeds on emotion, especially fear. So what happens when millions of people fear the same thing? What if, over time, Annabelle stopped being just a doll and became a thought form, a living curse of collective belief? That theory began spreading after 2020. Paranormal researchers suggested that Annabelle's legend had evolved into something beyond control, that she no longer needed a body to move. She could travel through stories, through digital energy, through the very screens that display her. Skeptics laughed, but believers stayed quiet, because those who mock often become the next stories told in whispers. In 2021, a YouTuber from Ohio decided to prove Annabelle's myth wrong. He broke into an old building rumored to house cursed items and brought along a replica of the doll, daring Annabelle to appear. The live stream started with jokes and laughter, but 20 minutes in, his tone changed. The camera began shaking. He said he felt something pulling his shirt. Then, without warning, the feed cut to static. When his viewers replayed the recording later, they noticed something no one had seen during the stream. For a single frame in the background, the original Raggedy Ann doll, Annabelle, appeared sitting on a chair. Of course, the clip went viral. Debunkers called it fake. Others said it was edited. But what made people uneasy wasn't the clip itself. It was the YouTuber's reaction. He refused to talk about it afterward, deleted his channel, moved out of state. His friends say he's never been the same. There's an unspoken rule among investigators of the paranormal. When you record something cursed, don't play it back at night. Not because it will jump out, but because you might hear something new the second time. That's what one museum volunteer claimed. She stayed late cataloging artifacts, headphones on, reviewing old recordings from the Warren archives. Midway through one tape, she heard a faint laugh, a small, childlike giggle that wasn't on the original reel. Moments later, the lights flickered. The next morning, she didn't come back to work. Her resignation email was short, only 4 words. It blinked at me. Annabelle now rests, or appears to rest, inside a sealed glass case in Monroe, Connecticut. Visitors aren't allowed near it anymore. The museum operates under strict supervision, and access is limited. But sometimes, even from behind the glass, strange things happen. One night, a security guard doing rounds at 2 a.m. stopped near her case to check the locks. He swears the doll's head turned slightly toward him. He dropped his flashlight and ran. The footage was reviewed later. The camera angle didn't show any movement, but when they paused at the moment he fled, a reflection appeared in the glass, not his, but another face, smiling faintly. So what's the truth behind Annabelle? Maybe she's just a story, a mix of folklore, exaggeration, and Hollywood. Or maybe, like the Warrens believed, evil never truly dies. It just waits for someone to believe in it again. Whether you're a skeptic or a believer, one thing is certain: fear gives things power. And every time you think of Annabelle, talk about her, or watch videos like this one, you're part of the story now. Because if she truly can move through belief, through thoughts, through words, through screens, then maybe she's closer than you think. Look behind you. Did you hear that? The story of Annabelle isn't over